if you have something that's just an artistic expression, you're making a film for yourself, that's very different than making a commercial film where there's, expectations of an investment, expectations of a return. Um, in that case, usually what people do if they want the best return is they cater the end result towards a specific audience, you know. And if you're doing an artistic piece, the audience is you. Like it's for you. It's not for anyone else. You're not directing it in any way that's shaped for a certain person. You're just making it for yourself, and that I think is the biggest difference in telling stories, is the expectation of, what do you want out of it.
Yeah.
And then when you go into commercials, it's like you definitely need certain metrics that when money's involved, yeah, you need certain metrics. Yeah.
I want to start by giving you the opportunity to introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what's your story.
Yeah, no worries. So I'm from New York, born and raised in the Bronx. I basically have been doing some form of storytelling my whole life. Growing up, I was really into writing, art. In college, I kind of leaned more towards psychology. That was kind of what drew me to, the human behaviors, especially. So I was really fascinated with that, and I started incorporating storytelling into that. And then, just getting out of psych, getting into film, kind of led me in this direction of more and more storytelling visually. And then the past year and a half, I started Limit Break Media, which is my way to fund this bigger goal that I have, where I want to, curate a bunch of inspiring stories from limit breakers from all over the world, and try to curate in one place in every different medium. So I want to get, audio. We'll do the podcast, films, documentaries, art, collaborations, things like that, and have it be like a real art piece. So that's my goal. And then I do this, marketing company that I started, where I'm taking everything that I learned from sales, psychology, storytelling, kind of putting it all together in my kind of visual, like artistic expression, and trying to help businesses grow their social media, change their websites, rebrand, similar to what you're doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know you're focused on really hitting the soul of the business, right? I think
Yeah.
that's a good way to put it. Like you
Yeah.
really want to find the soul of what they're doing, and it all starts with their story. So that's something I've just been fascinated with. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love to get some insights of people upbringing and childhood, because I think there are many gems in there for us
Yeah.
to get to understand who they are and
Sure.
how they became the people that they are. So have you had the opportunity to reflect and do a little bit of the introspective work required for you to understand how your childhood and your upbringing shaped and molded you into the person that you are today?
Yeah, for sure. I haven't had any professional coaching or anything like that, but I've definitely had a lot of introspective thought on this. And the more and more as I get older and I start to really try to understand people more, I understand that it's like, cause and effect is huge, especially when you're in your childhood. It's kind of shaping who you are, and just thinking about that has led me to, kind of understand people a little better. So there's always a reason for it. And then of course, like I think back, like I can only speculate. I'm not like 100% certain. But yeah, there's certain things in my childhood that definitely shaped who I am today. I'm definitely it's also something that you can change. For example, like I was very much an introvert most of my life. For whatever reason, that was my thing, like just people pleasing, always trying to be like non-confrontational. um I was a shy kid, and then just slowly, you realize that that's not the only way to live. There's other ways to live, and you can slowly move out of that if you want to. It's not something that it's like stuck with. It's just something that, probably that was my, best way to get by when I was a kid. So that's kind of something that I've been thinking about. but yeah, it's definitely something that's been on my mind a lot more recently,
Yeah.
as far as like thinking about the cause and effect of childhood and like our behaviors today.
Yeah. Have you been able to reflect on what was it about your childhood and your environment that essentially molded you into a shy person?
Hmm. I haven't really reflected too much on that, honestly. Um, I'd have to say it was easier, you know? It was just easier to not deal with things. Like, I was very, like, adverse to confrontation. Um, like, I got into fights when I was little, like, when I was pretty young. Like, I was going to, like, public school and stuff, and then, my mom pulled me out of there and then put me into Catholic school. So, less fighting, it was, like, a little less of that, but, still that same mentality. Like, just, like, keep take it easy, don't bother anyone, just get by. Um, that was kinda like how that's, like, how I saw things,
Yeah.
growing up. It was very passive aggressive
Yeah.
in the
and I and
household,
I
yeah.
and I really love this idea of you then going on to changing yourself and transforming yourself into the person that you knew you needed to be, which is not
Yeah,
necessarily an extrovert, but somebody who had to overcome some of the things associated with being an introvert because they didn't serve
yeah,
you and the direction you were going into. And I think this is something that is super powerful in that most of us think of
mm,
our personality traits as something that is fixed, something that cannot be changed. And in your example, and certainly in my case, it's not always true. There are many things about who we are and what made up our personality that we can change and we can evolve and we can grow. What was that
mm.
process for you to evolving and changing who you were to becoming the person that you knew you needed to become?
It's like you said, it just wasn't serving me. Like, I started becoming more and more ambitious. Like, I have these ideas that, starting watching more and more people who are doing inspiring things, and it just led me to realize, like, all right, it's possible. You just have to go for it. And that
Yeah,
was what was kind of holding me back before. And then so I realized, like, if I just kept being the same comfortable position, never putting myself out there, never doing anything like, outside the norm, then I'm just going to be stuck there. And that's the last thing that I wanted. So in order to grow, I realized, like, I just have to really, like, give in to the uncomfortable and just, kind of just be braver. That was kind of
yeah,
my mindset. So the braver I am, the more confident I am because I'm able to do stuff that's uncomfortable more and more. And then that confidence comes from, just doing it, just putting in the reps. And
yeah,
that was really necessary for me to get this far, at least. I'm still growing. I'm still looking to expand this and get bigger. And it's just, now it's just a matter of time.
yeah.
Now I know the tools to make it happen and to exponentially keep growing, which is pretty cool. I never thought it would be possible before. Like, I never thought I'd own a business. Like, that was the last thing I would think. Like, I was always in this mindset of, like, working for someone and then retiring.
Yeah,
And then, as I got older and closer, like, you get closer to that age where you're like, is this it? Like, I can't. Not for me, no. I see other inspiring people doing other things, and it's just like, I want that instead. Yeah.
yeah. So it sounds to me like you have this um, period of your life where you understood that you essentially had to move beyond your perceived limitation. And is
Mm.
that the origin of limit breakers? Like, what does it mean to be a limit breaker? And does the inception of the business and this idea, is it related to that personal story of yours of essentially pushing beyond the limits and the limitation that society or yourself have set for you?
Yeah, exactly. So, it's just something that has always been on my mind to not give up and to persist. Like, I'm very stubborn in that way, where I don't like giving up, and that's definitely something, that I got from my mom. Very stubborn. And but this persistence has helped me get through things and kind of, you figure out there's different parts in your life where it's like you don't think something's possible, but for some reason or another you go for it, and then it happens, and then you're like, then it just shatters this belief that you have that you're limited in some way, that there's like something that's unattainable. And just that just that idea is kind of what led me to this, where it's like I really want to talk to limit breakers who find their limits, who have to go through the struggle to find their limits and decide to push past it. So
Mm,
that's fascinating to me, people who are able to do that. And yeah, that's kind of the idea behind the whole name. Yeah.
yeah. So, what have you learned about people in this journey of creating and listening and sharing people's story?
I really learned how resilient people can be, and I think that's a trait that you can work on. Like, it's a skill that you can work on, and I've really found that people who decide not to give up, even through like the craziest struggles, it's just inspiring to me, because it just you realize that anything really is possible. Like, if you just it's silly to say that it's like all in your mind, but it's a huge part of it. Your mindset is a huge part of it. It's dictating your behavior. And so listening to all these different stories has kind of very much changed my perspective on what's possible. And that gives me a lot of hope in myself to be able to grow and get past anything, that I know that whatever the challenge is, I'll figure it out. Like, these people have gone through way worse, and these other people have like conquered way more things, way bigger things, relatively. And it's just, anything is possible when you put all that together, and you see the bigger picture of like, this is optimum, like, human behavior right here, is like pushing past your limits and growing. That's how we keep growing, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the same question then, what have you learned about
Yeah.
yourself through those stories?
I mean, the biggest thing that I've learned is that more and more it's kind of validating this idea that I have of pushing past your fears, and kind of changing your idea of what fear is. So it's like, instead of fear used to be something that I would recognize and then immediately back away from. And you'd feel these like sensations in your body, tightness in your chest, your stomach. And it's just like, you want to avoid that pain at all costs. And once you decide to commit to leaning into fear, you realize that that pain is so temporary, that after a while, and then after a while, you keep leaning into the fear, the pain becomes less and less harsh. You become less fearful about things, and you're able to actually put yourself out there a lot more. So I've definitely put myself out there way more than I have in the past year and a half, than probably the last 30 years of my life.
Oh, wow. So, what's
Yeah.
the scariest thing you've done to date?
Um, some people would say it's scary to quit your job and try to, do your thing full time. But actually, that was kind of like the easiest decision I made,
Mm,
because I've been doing it for, I was trying to get a career in film for like several years. I was working nights, full time, 40-hour work weeks, working from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. Doing customer service, coaching, and sales. And then during the day, I'd go out to auditions, and I'd film on the weekends, and I'd constantly be busy doing stuff. And I was kind of used to that. And then it got to the point where I was starting this business and still working at night and trying to make it work. And something switched, where it got to the point where I knew what I needed to do, and now I just needed the time and the energy to do it.
yeah.
So I just felt, so for some reason or another, I felt so confident that I can pull it off if I just had more time. And that was very relieving. Um, but then, they have these times during the year where it's just like not busy at all. And it's just like, oh my God, is this even going to work? Is this happening? Recently I had to give up. I had this studio space in Long Island, and I recently gave it up, because it just wasn't working out. Like, I had to think of another direction. So for example, like, we gave up the studio. We were going to go in the direction of video production, more into that realm. And then it wasn't viable. We weren't ready yet. So that's something that was like scary to admit, but you just have to pivot and move on. So now I'm changing things out, figuring things out, moving to remote work, for example, and then it's just it's scary, but like I said earlier, it's like if you have all these people in your mind, that it really changes your perception of like, okay, you'll figure it out. Like
Yeah.
it's not that scary. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's something powerful about the kind of perspective that other people's stories give us, right? And you
Right.
touched on that earlier in terms of it's not as bad as, I may perceive it to be, knowing what I know, knowing the kind of things that I know other people have to go through and have to overcome.
Yeah.
And I think there is something in that where you can almost borrow other people's track record by seeing and hearing yourself in their stories, and embodying a little bit more of the kind of resiliency, bravery, and grit that they had to
Yeah.
exhibit in order for them to overcome whatever challenges they have. And I find that very, very inspiring and very powerful as an idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, we if you take it back to empathy, putting yourself in their shoes, if you have strong empathy, you're able to really relate to these people even more, which I think is important. So you're able to connect with people even more and kind of get the most out of these stories, as opposed to, not being in a space where you can pay attention to it.
Yeah.
If you're actually in a space mentally where you can pay attention to these stories and learn from other people's mistakes and learn from other people's successes, it definitely puts you in a better position, and you can only be you can only get better at that if you're more empathetic, I think.
Absolutely. So telling other people's story in a way
Mm,
that feels authentic to them is a huge responsibility. So
yeah.
what is your relationship with that responsibility, and how do we make it happen? How do we do it?
You just have to be honest, I think.
What does that
Honesty
mean?
is really, um you have to be, really honest about what your story is, and shape it in a way that kind of tells who you really are. And a lot of people, they think it should be, like a cool, like they should make it look cool. Um, but like being cool will only get you so far. Authenticity will get you the furthest. So it's like you're kind of limited. It's like short term thinking if you're not thinking authentically. Um, so that being said, if you're not looking for a long-term thing, then you don't really have to tell an authentic story. But if you are looking to build something that's gonna last, I think starting with the honest truth is the best way to start.
Yeah.
And it's really asking the right questions, which, you kind of it just takes experience to get to that point. You figure out, like a detective, you're figuring out which questions to ask, how to dig deeper, how to understand what's really like what they really, really want, what people's like true wants are. And then you can kind of shape and help shape their story to get them to their goals. And yeah, it's a process that definitely takes experience, but it's a skill like anything else.
Yeah. There is something so intricate and powerful that I don't think you realize until like you start interviewing people. And
Mhm.
is when we think about empathy, we think about this prerogative to really put ourselves in somebody else's shoe, to really understand who they are. But I think the half of that, the part of that that is not talked about, at least in my mind, is the fact that even when you are open to this idea of really understanding people, you are also at the mercy of how much of themselves they are willing to share with you, how much
Mm.
of that is truly authentic to them, because as individuals it's very hard to open up to presumably a stranger. So your ability to empathize is a function of your ability to put yourself in their shoes, but also
Mhm.
your ability to create an environment and circumstances where they feel comfortable, open enough to share perhaps the most vulnerable parts of themselves, or
Yeah.
to even guide them, because the very sense of who they are is not always even clear to themselves. What is your process in helping people and in guiding them so that you can arrive at their most authentic story so you can tell it?
So first things first, you have to take yourself out of it. Like, you can't take anything personally. You can't be defensive in any way if you really want to understand people. Um, because you have to lead with vulnerability.
Hmm.
You have to be authentic yourself, and you have to really just be non-judgmental. I think is the best way to look at it, where it's like you're just trying to understand them objectively. You're not trying to put anything on it. You're not trying to put your own issues that you've had from your childhood on these other people, on these strangers. You don't know them, so you have to be open to honestly just listening. And that's something that I struggle with most of my life, is being a good listener.
Yeah.
I'm constantly trying to give advice. I'm constantly trying to help people. Like, I'm the problem solver, and that's not what people need. So people just need you to listen, honestly, and that's something that I've been realizing a lot more and more lately. In all my relationships, it's just trying to objectively listen, and then you'll be surprised at what comes out of that.
Absolutely. I mean, there are three powerful ingredients that you brought up in that answer that I want to attempt to summarize. I feel like the first thing that I heard you say was this idea of, if we want people to disclose a little bit more of themselves, then we need to lead by example, right? We have to almost say, I love you first. We have to be the ones to disclose of ourselves first, and be transparent, and be vulnerable, so that they can feel comfortable being vulnerable and opening up. That's the first idea that I heard. And then you
Mhm.
talked about the importance of listening. And I think, as I have this conversation, being a good listener has become such an important and recurring theme if you want to build empathy and if you want to empathize with other people. Because unless you can truly, truly hear them, unless you can suspend your own judgment, to your point, unless you can suspend your own narrative, it's very, very impossible, or difficult at least, to hear people. And then the last
Yeah.
thing is, you have to ask great questions, right? Like the art of asking question is something that the conversation, the story, the research, whatever it is only as good as the type of questions that you ask. And this is definitely, as I go through this journey and I do more of these, those three skills have become a little bit more at the forefront of, in order for me to truly be able to build empathy with other people, I have to be able to do those three things. Like, what are the
Right.
other things in that toolbox that you are mindful of as you are trying to empathize with other people?
So some other things that I'm mindful of. I often try to remember that, I go through bad days, often. I suffer some, um, depression. I have this thyroid issue, which messes with me mentally and physically. So it's like I know that there's things that's out of my control that affect my mood, affect my, how I talk to people. And so I know that that's possible. And I know other people are going through whatever they're going through. So you really have to pay attention to that. And you know, if someone is like mean to you on the street, or if someone like gives you a side eye or something like that, you can't normally people would assume that it's because of something they did, right? It's because of me. It's something I did. But what's wrong with assuming that, it has nothing to do with you? Until there's actual proof, until like someone makes physical contact or something, there's no proof, there's no evidence. So why base your assumption off something that's negative instead of something that's positive, or something that's like understanding of, they're probably upset. They probably just had an interaction, you know, 2 seconds ago. You never know what happened. You see this, it's great when you see, like, on a film set, when you see the behind the scenes, you get to see the full context of the situation, but then in the film, you only see that small little clip, that small little highly edited clip that, was kind of designed for that. And then you kind of think about that as like, you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg when you talk to people. So understanding that is a very powerful tool to be able to get you to be more objective and more empathetic, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. assuming the best intentions and assuming the best in people. I think is also a very, very powerful thing.
Mhm.
And if your default is that most people are always trying their best, then when they do something that is not the best version of themselves, then you assume that there must be something going on. And that brings us back to that cause and effect
Mhm.
realization that you brought up at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's there's definitely a cause and effect, and the more that you see it in yourself, the more that you are able to recognize that everybody's going through something, and
Yeah.
it's usually not about you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, what you're touching on there is this idea that I realized is that the first step to empathy is actually self-awareness, because I think the more and the deeper and the better you understand yourself, the more you can hear and see yourself in other people. You know that,
Right.
my thing doesn't necessarily find expression in the same way, but I have a version of that too. I too have days where I look like that, I behave like this. I too am
Yeah.
capable of doing X, Y, and Z. And I think it's something very powerful there to have that kind of self-awareness, because in that, you are able to empathize with people a lot more. At least I found in my experience.
No, you definitely can. You can relate to people more. You can you just don't take things as, as personally anymore. And then when you stop taking things as personally, you stop becoming as defensive. And then, people want to talk to you more. People don't
Yeah.
want to talk to people who are defensive, who are constantly making excuses and constantly like, they want to talk to someone who will listen to them. That's the key.
So storytelling as an art has different metrics, and I guess as a marketing tool has different
Hmm.
metrics. Or maybe that should have been the question. Does storytelling as an art have different metrics than storytelling as a marketing tool?
What are you referring to when you say metrics in this case?
Yeah, because in my mind, I'm thinking, let's say you have this project of one day making a film,
Hmm.
that talks about this big idea of moving past your limits.
Right.
How would you measure success in that endeavor?
I see. So for me, I believe it just depends on the expectations, right? If you have something that's just an artistic expression, you're making a film for yourself. That's very different than making a commercial film where there's expectations of an investment, expectations of a return. In that case, usually what people do if they want the best return is they cater the end result towards a specific audience. you know and if you're doing an artistic piece, the audience is you. Like it's for you. It's not for anyone else. You're not directing it in any way that's shaped for a certain person. You're just making it for yourself, and that I think is the biggest difference in telling stories, is the expectation of, what do you want out of it.
Yeah.
And then when you go into commercials, it's like you definitely need certain metrics that when money's involved, yeah, you need certain metrics, yeah.
So, and then does your approach to that process change then?
I'd say um it shouldn't change. Like 99% of it shouldn't change, but the reality is, there are certain things that you have to do in order to cater to a certain specific audience. So you don't really change the storytelling approach, but you mostly change how you tell the story, I think. So the methods that you use to tell a story, versus something that's artistic where you're free to do whatever. So when you're in a commercial environment, you kind of have to, you're it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. You're kind of limited in a way where it's like you have to be more creative to get the same story. Um, but also it's kind of like it's just different than being, you have this artistic freedom to do whatever you want for yourself. But then when you're doing something for a commercial, there's expectations that you have to, realistically listen to, and that will kind of shape how you tell a story, not necessarily the process of like telling the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I know in that at times there is this relationship with the client that
Mm,
requires certain level of dexterity to navigate, right? Like the client has a specific set of metrics, a return on that investment that they are looking for. But you,
mm,
as the storyteller, is trying to point out the fact that the very way you get what you want is to tell real, honest, authentic stories where
yeah.
people, and in this case, your potential customer, your audience, can see and hear themselves and relate to. How do you guide clients through that conversation?
So yeah, it's a matter of being able to relate to them in a way that kind of sets the expectation to, what you think of. You have to be subtle about it, and kind of indirect. Um, Anything that sounds too, like, if you see anything that sounds like a commercial or sounds like an ad, it's too salesy, it's too forward. That's not really it, that's one way to get it, but if you really want to get, a real connection to your audience, you have to be able to tell a story, and you have to be able to tell an authentic story, because that's what people really relate to the most. Um, so it's really different. You just have to approach it differently. You have to ask the right questions. You have to be able to guide them in a way that you know shows them that you're the expert storyteller. Um, and then obviously you have to be able to tell a story, but it's just a matter of the approach of the beginning, like the questioning, like the strategy. Everything is all has to do with that. It all has to do with how you kind of approach the story. And you can't it's not about convincing anyone. Like, you're not going to convince your client of anything. Like, if they have their own beliefs, it's not up to you to convince them. You just have to kind of guide them in a way, and get them to understand. Like, you can't force anyone to understand anything. So advertising that seems salesy is the opposite of what you want. You want
Yeah.
something that actually seems relatable and connected, and that's how that's how most people get that deeper connection.
Yeah. Who are some of the brands that do it very well, that you often refer to, or you often go back to or use as an inspiration in your own work?
Um, so I really like Red Bull, um, Patagonia. They take it pretty seriously, telling people stories. And they do it, or Red Bull does it differently than Patagonia. They do it differently than North Face, and they do it differently from Nike. But essentially, what they're doing is they're focusing on telling stories of, um, the people who it's designed for. So they're focused on telling, Apple. They're telling stories about, in order to relate to the actual people who are using it, and they're really taking their story seriously, and highlighting them, and curating them in a way, and visualizing them. So they all do it differently, but Red Bull, for example, is very extreme. They do a lot of extreme sports, but they also are really good at highlighting the athletes, and highlighting the people who are doing these things. Patagonia is great at telling stories, and kind of getting people to engage in a very authentic way that makes them feel connected, like they're part of it. Like, any brand that makes you feel part of it, like, I'm on Apple side versus Android, that's they're doing something where they're really connecting with you in a deep way, and
Yeah.
they all use different forms of storytelling to do that.
So, and I think creating a piece of work, whether it's an ad or a story that really connects with people in a deep way, I'm trying to understand your approach to this. Do you go and really try to gather and speak to a very narrow, specific audience of these are the core fans for whom this product is created or this service is created? Of course, other people are using it, but we want to speak to the core fan base. Or
Mm.
are you looking for an idea that has quote unquote universal resonance?
It just depends on what your goal is. There could be a certain campaign where you're looking to reach more people, and then see if people would resonate with your brand, for example. it's more of an awareness campaign. You can do more targeted, where you're focused on people who are further in the process. They're already interested in what you're offering. They're already interested and they already need what you want. They just need to be aware of you. So those people are more likely to be part of your brand. Um, so yeah, it's just different approaches. You just have to figure out what your end goal is, and then once you figure that out, then you can kind of tailor it to what am I expecting to happen out of this, and then you can kind of tailor the story that way.
I love that. I love that. I mean, I think you really hit it right on the head with this idea that at any given time there are two type of prospective customers, right? There are people that are in market actively looking for the product, the service, the solution that you or your company provide, and then there is an even bigger set of customers that do not need what you offer today, but potentially will in the future.
Yeah.
And what you want is to make sure that when the moment comes for them to finally make that purchase, that your brand is top of mind, which then means
Right.
that you have to engage them long before um, long before they are ready to buy, because at the moment they don't even need you. And to your point, if you go too narrow with a specific use case, then they might not even see it, because our brain and algorithms have this magnificent ability to tuning out anything that is not timely and relevant to us,
Yes.
which then means that if I'm not in the market for a new car, I'm sure on a daily basis there are hundreds of car commercials that I don't even see because I'm not in the market. So
Yeah.
they have to create a campaign that essentially has a universal resonance where I can engage with it because it's talking about something that is a little bit more broad and universal to the human experience.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about advertising, it's really just it's all subliminal. It's all subconscious. You know, you're not going to be able. You're definitely not going to see one piece of content or one ad and make a decision. Like 99% of the times, that's not how we shop. We like to look at reviews. We like to see what other people see. We like to make sure that the company's legit. Most of the time, we like to see if it's on a platform like Amazon, for example. Like, they hopefully vet everything, and then you can check out everything. You can see all the reviews, all that stuff. So, it's not something that, like, you make a beautiful ad and then people are just flocking towards your shop to buy everything. That's not really how it works. Like you said, you kind of have to play the long game. That's what this is. It's think about it, when you're building human connections with people. It's not about like, here's my business card. All right, see you later. And you kind of want to build a relationship with people. That's what you're doing. You're building relationships with people. All these different companies, they've built relationships with people over time through their branding, and they've done it in a way that really resonates with people, so that they're more likely to become fans. They're more likely to actually empathize with the company, with the other people that relate to the company. So yeah, it's all part of it.
Yeah. So I know you get to talk to just incredibly incredible human beings on a regular basis. Is there a story that stand out in your mind as something that really had a deep impact in who you are, the way you see the world, or really just had some deep emotional resonance for you?
Yeah, sure. So I think I really get something from every conversation that I've had, but I'll just talk about the first person that I've ever interviewed for this. Um, so his name is Donnie. He's in his 40s now, but he was telling me the story about how when he was 18 years old, he's playing football. He was kind of like, hanging out with his friends, living life, just being a kid. And then all of a sudden, he gets into an accident with his best friend, and he wakes up from a coma 2 weeks later. His friend died from the accident, and he wakes up with tons of nerve damage. He's missing both his legs, his arm, and his left arm, which is his non-dominant arm, is like mangled. and he can't speak. He's scared, and he basically talks about his experience of going through that and how it completely changed his life, and how he's like, and just the story of like how he got through that, all the highs and lows that came with that, especially the lows, and kind of how he forced himself to get through that, to push past it, and to realize that like this is his life now, and just to make the best of it. And he's like trying to become a, get his law degree, and help other people, advocate for people with disabilities. So he's doing really cool stuff. But that story really, stuck with me, that like anything can happen. Anything can happen. Nothing's, you know, can't take anything for granted. So, and then also it's like the human spirit is so wild that it can overcome anything. You
Yeah.
know, I can't even imagine losing all my limbs, and having to live like he lived a full life before that. He was 18 years old.
Um,
It's totally different. So when you think about that, and you think about what people go through, and kind of the changes that they're able to make, and that they're able to survive, and actually thrive through it, it's incredible.
uh, no, it's quite remarkable. Um, what an incredible story, man. So, at early in this conversation, you said something that was quite fascinating. You said that essentially your marketing agency was a
Hmm.
means to finance this project, your real calling, your real mission. Can you tell me more about that? I find it such a very powerful idea, because I think when you think about companies like Tom's, for example, right, like the
Yeah.
business is almost a ploy, a tool for them to finance their mission and the purpose. And one can argue that many of the most successful companies think about their businesses in that way, that this is just a means for us to contribute something of value to this planet. This is just a tool for us to enhance the human experience, that our purpose isn't really to make money, but we need money to be able to finance and pay for this cause that we are on.
Yeah, we definitely do. So that is definitely part of it. So what I did was, I was thinking about a way to kind of bring all my skills together. I was thinking of, everybody has these different vehicles to get what they want. People want financial security, they want safety, they want physical security, they want to eat, they want to be able to, go out, travel. Um, these are all different things that people want to do in order to, kind of live and express themselves and grow. And um, most people find different vehicles to kind of take those in. Like they find different hobbies and different jobs. They work different things to kind of get to that same path. So I just thought about it, and I was like, I want to be able to make an impact and inspire people in a large scale. And how do I work my way back to that? And I'm like, all right, it's going to cost a lot of money. I know how much it costs to make films and documentaries. It's very expensive, but the payoff is great, because you're able to tell a story and keep people engaged for like up to 2 hours or more, um, and really hear those stories. So I backtracked to that, and I'm like, all right, I could work full time and then also get another job, and try to fund this and get this going. Um, I could be doing something that's totally different from this and just make money. I can probably get a job doing something else and just make money and then do it that way. But I figured, after listening to a couple of these stories, I'm just like, what am I what am I doing if not, just leaning into what I'm good at, what I love doing, and trying to bring up people around me who, want that as well. They want that life, to be able to do what they love and be able to be, supported by that, and financially supported. So that's the goal for me, is to be able to both, you know, bring people up around me that can also support themselves, doing what they love, being creative. And so that was the whole goal of this. And I'm kind of thinking of different ways to merge them together, and kind of have them flow together and grow together. Um, like one thing, like the stories, limit break stories, like that's my idea of having an app where it just has a collection of all these different stories in every medium, like I mentioned, like art, music,
Mm,
dance, everything in one. And it's all, geared towards helping you get inspired, creatively or in whatever you need in your life right now. Um, so that's the end goal. And then, like I said, I just reverse engineered it, and then Limit Break Media was like my solution to that. So that it was just like something that I'm really good at, something that I would love to do every day that I can do for the rest of my life, and it's something that's very challenging. So
mm.
that was the key for me, because I find that I don't really do well unless I'm challenged, unless I challenge myself. So that's I couldn't think of a bigger challenge than that. So yeah,
Certainly.
yeah,
So we are unfortunately coming close to the end of our conversation together. I know you've sprinkled through this conversation so many answers around who is a limit breaker and what does it take to become one. But I thought it would be a good way for us to end by explicitly asking you the question, like
yes.
who, having gone and interviewed all these limit breakers, who is a limit breaker, and how can I also become a limit breaker?
So first, you have to be able to find your limits. You have to
Mm.
push yourself to find your limits, find what's holding you back, and then you have to be brave enough, and you have to have the courage enough to push past it and do what it takes to push past it, because it's possible. So if you can do that, you are a limit breaker.
I love that. I love that. And then have you gotten some insight as to how people um, develop the introspective work of understanding where the limits are and then honing the bravery skills required to push past those limits?
It seems like most people, you're not going to get there unless you really want it. So if you really have a goal in mind, if you have whatever it is that you want in life, and you really want to, you really understand that it takes a lot of effort, more effort. Like, we very much underestimate how much effort it takes, especially when we're talking about big goals and big aspirations, because we're not seeing the full picture, the exponential growth that's needed to get there. So it's realizing that, and then really not giving into fear and being uncomfortable. So if you can actually lean into what's scary, lean into what's uncomfortable, it'll get you further down that road to get this goal, and to be able to grow. And just know that, you'll figure it out. Like, just trust that you'll figure it out, and it'll happen.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. And I think this is a wonderful place for us to end on this note about bravery. I think we all have this illusion that the people that we admire are somehow fearless. But
Mm.
I'm sure what you found out in interviewing these incredible human beings is that they still feel the fear.
Yes.
They have just developed the ability to lean into that fear and to push past that fear and to really to be brave. Because when it comes down to it, fear is our only opportunity to be brave.
It is. It's your cue that you're going in the right direction.
I love that. Ronnie,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining
Thank
me
you, man.
on this conversation. Thank you for the work that you do. I know the power that inspiring stories have had on my journey and I having on my journey. When I feel stuck, when I feel lost, there is
Mm.
something inspiring to know that I'm either not uniquely flawed, or in recognizing that there are people just like me that have achieved what I perceive to be unachievable. And if they can do it, then perhaps I can too. So I cannot
Yes.
underestimate and say enough about the importance of the work that you do in bringing those stories and bringing that inspiration to people that long for more and who ultimately also want to contribute something of value to this world. So, on behalf of all those people, I want to thank you.
Thank you, Junior. I appreciate it. This is a great conversation.